Hello, fellow comic people. Today I come to you with a review of Polina by Bastien Vivês, a 2011 graphic novel translated into English in 2013 by Polly Mclean. It tells the story of Polina and her complicated relationship with her her first choreographer, Bojinski. At least that's the very first one, and kind of goes through a couple of different relationships with a couple of her different choreographers. It really kind of starts out with kind of sort of rather what to me felt really shocking. I mean, it's sort of old hat, I guess, in a way of like little, like tiny young little girls getting coming into the dance world. And indeed, it opens with her, like, in the car ride to the academy where she's going to try out to get into Bajinski's academy, and her mom saying, like, don't show any pain, because if you show any pain, they won't accept you, and you just basically have to put up. Interestingly enough, that is the first time, and I believe the last time, that we actually ever see the mother in this book, which is a thing in itself. Of in some ways, that was the passage of that was the end of her childhood right there, was her mom saying don't show any pain, and then pushed into these relationships with these teachers, these dance choreographers. And indeed, the very first scene of with Brzezinski is this kind of, it's really, in a lot of ways, it's incredibly creepy. It's all these prepubescent tiny little girls, basically just in underwear in their panties, just nothing else, and Bajinski calling them forward one at a time in this, like, with there's a group of adults. This is like accepted thing in society, and just like basically yanking on their legs and saying, like, are you supple enough? It's like, no, you're not supple enough. If you're not supple enough at 6, well, then you won't be supple enough later on. So you can't, this is something that you either have it or you don't, and you get cast out. Polina, for good or ill, is accepted into the Bajinski Academy, and thus starts out her career as a dancer. And there's a lot of scenes of Bajinski definitely has a reputation of being an extremely kind of a very harsh, kind of very demanding teacher, that he makes a lot of the girls cry, that a lot of the girls end up kind of flushing out of his system, but yet still, obviously, it seems to be highly respected at this point, and people want the people compete to be able to have their little girls compete to learn from him. And and Bajinski's definitely, he's as you go through the book, he's got, like, as the first part of the book, he has all this stuff of, like, if you don't show them grace and lightness, they will only see effort and strain. And emotions must be contained and mastered. Someone who can't manage their own emotions holds no interest for me. And there's a lot of these scenes, like, we have this scene here of, like, Bajinski's got his hands on her. It's like, it's a very intimate relationship that this choreographer has with Polina. It's like, hands on her, and it's like as a kind of like a young little girl, and he is shown as this big, dominant, overbearing presence. And it's funny, I can get so much from this cover, which is quite representative of the kind of the blocky, very expressive but not detailed art style, which actually I quite enjoy because you can project so much into it. But Bajinski here, as you see, you never see his actual eyes, or rarely see his actual eyes. You only see his glasses, which are these blank things, which it's like everybody's kind of projects. You can see yourself projecting onto, or being this just kind of hulking, dominant, threatening, overwhelming overwhelming presence in Polina's life, and in the lives of the other students, who, in various ways, kind of rebel against it quietly off to the side, or make fun of it, but also are subject to it. And indeed, it's like, in this dance world, obviously, it's like the choreographer is king or queen, and indeed, as we go through the book, she leaves Budziński and goes on to different teachers, and they all have their various levels of demands. And very much at the beginning, you're just like, oh my God, this guy is horribly abusive. This is like what movie what came to my mind was the 2014 movie Whiplash, which has got Miles Teller as a drummer and J.K. Simmons as this horribly, I mean, unambiguously abusive teacher who is basically tortures poor Miles and drives him harder until he kind of like almost breaks, but it's supposedly for the art or something like that. And through a lot of this book, I thought, oh, okay, well, this is sort of the same story of Budziński as this terrible, terrible person. But unlike Whiplash, the movie, this book has a much more complicated viewpoint, a much more complicated relationship with the student and the choreographer. And indeed, as it goes along, there becomes a shift. Polina actually has her own agency. She becomes her own kind of artist as we go along. She goes through a lot of stuff where she could just become another cog in this machine, another piece for these choreographers to move around, but she actually finds her own way, which actually makes this quite the stunning book. And I'm not gonna, I won't give away the end of this book, but there's quite a stunning kind of reverse Clark Kent, which isn't like a disguise, but it's something that has been projected onto Budziński, which is quite an emotionally stunning thing. And this is a book. It's a book about art, in a lot of ways, about the artistic process. One of the characters says to Polina at one point that dance is art. There's no opponent and no partner. But that gets complicated. This is a book that actually does like to complicate things. It gets complicated with just the visual of the waltz and of two people dancing as partners. And it's quite lovely how that gets put together. And indeed, Polina, as she goes along in the book, where it's not necessarily the people early, but she actually finds sort of there's a partnership that gets developed that actually is a key to her own artistic success. So yeah, it's quite a wonderful book. I would like to, now people are very much for kind of like, oh, there is just that original scene at the beginning of Polina as a prepubescent girl with Budziński coming to test them, but it's a very kind of a blocky, kind of inky style. Just like I can see, this is kind of broad paint brushes, which gives for, and then at the beginning, like there's not very much detail in the background scenes, which very much it's keeping you in Polina's point of view, whereas later it can get more Baroque, even though it's still within this the Bastien Vivês of style. And indeed, you get certain things which I have to say must be like, there is references to someone like Degas in some of the images there, even though it's still done in his own style. And I also love just like how the simple forms just gives you the expression of movement. It's funny how something like comic art is actually I mean, I guess, you think about a superhero comics, a lot of them are, it's more about the movement than it's about the story. And indeed, in this book with a dancer, he really captures, just the movement, the supple, she's supple, so she gets in, supple movement. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Polina, a book that is, if you're kind of unsatisfied with sort of the rather kind of like male kind of either or combative, and it's just gonna be like, we're gonna break you kind of idea of kind of rather false idea I thought of the artist. Polina would be an interesting book to check out as a book where it gives you a wider vista. It gives you a more complicated, maybe more mature idea of maybe what an artist is and what goes into it. So yes, that's my review of Polina by Bastien Vivês. Definitely, I would say check it out. More videos later.